All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the first of probably what will be many simple, short tutorials on a couple of components that I've been designing in Altspace that are basically not already provided by the SDK, but are nice features to have for different things. This one is pretty much a zone that you can enter that will cause one of three different things to happen. The first one, it will change a sound effect that is currently playing. If you're listening, we have both wind and music playing right now. And that would be the second option, would be changing background music that would be playing for your players. And the third option would be a sort of bubble that you'll see that will appear on your face and change the color of everything that you're in. So it could darken things if you're just using a lower opacity, lower like black thing, or you could just lighten things up if you want to make it look like it's sunny outside or you're not used to the sun. You could give like a bright yellow. So first I'm going to demonstrate what this is, and then I'll show you the actual code that you need. So this is basically like a water cube that I've created. When you collide with it, makes everything look blue, like you just plunged your face underwater, and it kind of plays this warbly underwater, like I'm waving my head and my body underwater kind of sound effect. And then if you pop back out, bubble goes away, sound goes back to wind. The second one that I've created is a forest version, which will make you hear crickets. It will darken everything, and then it also changes the music playing, just to kind of give you a demonstration of what that will look like. All right, so that's the gist of how this little zone system works. Now let's get to the coding part. I'm assuming that if you're going to be doing this, you'll have at least a little bit of knowledge of A-frame. So I'm assuming what you'll see here is relatively recognizable. All right, so this is what you'll be seeing and this is what basically I need you to create if you want to use this component. You'll need to create a PC and gear noise entity, and then by noise that means that's where your background noise is going to be playing. So just create it, set it as an end sound, and give it whatever current sound volume and information that you want your background noise to be, and then make sure you would parent that to the player's spine. And then you're basically going to create the exact same thing, except it'll be a music version and a music gear. So the only difference between the PC and the gear is that one is the OGG that will play for PC users, and one is the MP3 that will play for Daydream and Gear VR users. So make sure you create those four entities, put them anywhere that you want in your scene. They'll attach to your body, follow you around, and play the volume or play the sound that you're actually hearing right now. The next thing that you'll need to make is a sphere that you will call a bubble, and that is what you saw. That is the bubble that will attach to your face and kind of dim or color everything to whatever you want your zone to be looking like. So you would create a sphere with the ID of bubble. You would set its material visibility to false, and then you'll scale it down to 0.25 on all the three axes. That'll just kind of make this tiny little bubble that appears around your face. Last but not least, this isn't necessarily a requirement, but it's definitely something I recommend you invest in. There's no way to create a sound asset, so the best way to load an asset, a sound that you want to be using elsewhere that you don't want the player to have to load when they actually end up using that asset, is to just create an entity and set it to an event that never actually happens. And that's what this is, event that never happens. So unless you say you want that event to happen when you do something that would cause an event, which I'm not going to get into, this will never happen. You can name that whatever you want, any event that you don't expect to be using if you plan on using events in the first place. And then after that, you would just provide the source to whatever sound. So I'm preloading the OGG and MP3 versions of the underwater sound effect. And then you just create a box. relatively simple. Give it a name, give it a scale, give it a position. That's all simple stuff. Give it a color and an opacity. Opacity isn't required. That's just kind of a nice effect. And then what I did is I disabled the cursor collider because I want players to be able to click through it, click into it, and click out of it. Otherwise, you know, it is technically land. You're teleporting to the zone. You don't want people's colliders to just be hitting the zone, floating there, especially if the zone is invisible and you're just populating it with models inside that area. So, yeah. And then finally, I'm actually using the environment collision component, and it requires quite a few different things to be fulfilled. However, a lot of them are, it's a modular system. You don't need all of them. It's just whatever information you give it, it will do that. So you can give it a noise URL and link to the same URL that you preloaded. The only difference is you don't need to add the OGG or MP3 ending. It's simply the link to the name. The OGG and MP3 is given to you in the actual code after it checks to see if you're on mobile or not, so then you're not loading twice as many sounds. So you give that link, then you set the volume of the background noise that you want it to be set to, and that's for when you enter. The default URL and the default volume are then what you want it to switch to after you exit the zone again. So this time I'm just linking to my wind sound effect, and I'm setting its volume. Last but not least, I am giving a color and an opacity for the bubble. Color is dark blue, opacity is 75%. Opacity is how much transparency, how much of it is there. So lower opacity means it's not as invisible, so you won't have so much dimming. Whereas higher opacity means it's more solid and it's going to be harder to see through it. So that's the gist of what I've done. And that creates a blue cube that when I enter, it sets the bubble color and opacity around your face, and that just follows you wherever you look. And then it plays this sound at the volume that you give. And when you leave, it then plays the default sound effect that you want it to switch back to. And that automatically invisibilifies your bubble. The joints and joint cube size are basically how big you want the check to be around the joint that you provide. I would recommend just staying at head center 0. That means it checks the middle of your head at the exact middle of your head. That's what that does. Joint cube size says it's only 1 unit around your head. And I do not believe you can go any smaller than 1. We've tried, but it gets a little derpy. So while this still might happen a little far away from your zone, it's not a major issue, I think, because if your face gets close enough, like, I don't think someone's going to get their face right up next to water and then be like, oh, it's not actually working correctly, because most people that go in the water are going to fall in and immediately go blue. So that's that. The forest is basically the same, except I'm doing it with music as well. So once again, I'm preloading the cricket sound effect that you heard playing, and I'm preloading the dance song that I found. These are songs that I found online. They're free for use. I did not produce the music that you're hearing or any of the sound effects. I've just found them and utilized them. So I create a 555 cube, greenish looking, half opacity. You can click through it. Same thing with the joints. You technically don't have to include the joint cube size if you plan on keeping it at 1. That's the default. So, yeah. So then you have the music URL, and it's setting to the dance URL, except no OGG or MP3. And then I'm setting its volume. And then I'm setting, of course, what song I want it to play when you leave, which is, I've named it ambient. I'm setting its volume, setting the crickets link, and then I'm setting the wind link for when you leave. And then I'm giving it a slightly less visible bubble that's more of a dark greenish color. So I'm assuming if you were in a densely packed forest and you couldn't see the sky, everything would kind of be dark. Everything would kind of have a greenish hue to it because where the leaves... Well, actually, no, that's not realistic. Technically, nothing would look greenish, but it kind of... I figured it would be a nice mask to put on a forest. So yeah. And that is the gist of what you would write if you want, or when you're producing the A-frame component. The JavaScript side of things, obviously this is a lot of information that you don't need to understand. Whatever you're looking at, you can try and take it apart if you want, but I'm not going to put a lot of information about what this is. The gist of what this is, though, is I'm creating a variable and I'm checking to see if mobile is true if you're using a headset. And then that's why when you provide the link, it first checks to see if mobile is true. And if mobile is true, it adds an MP3 to the end. If mobile isn't true, it adds an OGG to the end of the URL, and then it actually calls that URL. So I will provide a paste bin, or actually no, I will just provide this entire JS bin link for you guys to look at and take apart and look through whatever you need. All of this JavaScript, you can just Control-A, Control-V. All of the JavaScript that you see here is only what you need to get the environmental collision component working correctly. The HTML, you can rip apart what you do and don't want. Obviously, you don't need everything in here to make it work. This is just what you'll be doing, what you'll be writing to do it. I also recommend that if you plan on using this component, don't just copy-paste. Copy-paste the original and then type your version in, because a great way to learn what you're doing is actually by redundantly retyping what you've already typed to force your muscle memory and your actual memory to know. Because it's kind of like when people say what you see in class doesn't help teach you as much as when you write it down. Taking notes, just writing it down tells your brain you need to memorize this. So if you want to remember how to use this correctly, I just recommend rewriting it, retyping it over and over again. So copy pasting and changing a few little aspects isn't as helpful to you as actually writing it out yourself. Then again, you may experience a couple bugs, and if you write it out and you don't understand it, and there are bugs that you don't know where you may have made mistakes, copy paste. You've still written it out, so it's the best you can do. So yeah, I hope this helped, and I'd like to see some people using this in the future. I really hope that you find me, ask me if you don't understand things, or give me some recommendations, and obviously leave a comment and a like and all that good YouTube shizzle. I'll see you in the next component video.